Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
Unfortunately, the White House is so unserious about cutting spending that it appears willing to slow walk any agreement and walk our economy right up to the fiscal cliff.
We still have this insistence that we're not going to do anything that doesn't include tax cuts for the wealthy from the Republicans, and that's just not acceptable to the president.
As negotiations continue between the White House and House Speaker John Boehner, we'll speak with economist Dean Baker on the myths around the so-called fiscal cliff. Then opposition is growing to the Federal Communications Commission's plan to lift media ownership rules. We'll speak with former Commissioner Michael Copps.
Every time you consolidate, you lose a local voice. You lose an element of localism. You lose coverage of a community's ethnic diversity and its cultural diversity. And it's bad for America.
And retired Army Colonel Ann Wright and Father John Deere are just back from peacemaking mission in Afghanistan. Wright helped oversee the reopening of the U.S. Embassy in Kabul in 2001.
There is a reason why Afghans are shooting Americans. We have invaded and occupied their country, and the numbers of warlords that are part of the government who have their militias that are now being retrained, re-equipped in the new National Army means that they will come back to those warlords later.
All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Susan Rice, has withdrawn her name as a potential successor to outgoing Secretary of State Hillary Clinton following weeks of Republican-led opposition. Republicans have campaigned against Rice's potential appointment since her name surfaced earlier this year, accusing her of misleading the public about the deadly September 11th attack on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi, Libya. In a letter to President Obama, Rice said, quote, "I'm fully confident I could serve our country ably and effectively. However, if nominated, I am now convinced the confirmation process would be lengthy, disruptive, and costly," she wrote. Rice is expected to stay on as UN envoy, while Obama could tap another rumored candidate, Massachusetts Senator John Kerry. While the partisan clash over Rice focused on Benghazi, progressive critics had pointed to Rice's hawkish foreign policy record while serving under the Clinton and Obama administrations, as well as her financial interests in the proposed Keystone XL oil pipeline. She meets with President Obama today. The Pentagon's approved a deployment of around 400 U.S. military personnel and 2 Patriot missile batteries to Turkey. NATO authorized Turkey's request for the missiles earlier this month amidst cross-border tensions with neighboring Syria. Defense Secretary Leon Panetta confirmed the deployment during a visit to Turkey.
I just announced this morning that we are deploying 2 Patriot batteries here to Turkey, along with the troops that are necessary to man those batteries, so that we can help Turkey have the kind of missile defense it may very well need in dealing with threats that come out of Syria.
The U.S. batteries will coincide with another 4 from Europe, with all 6 expected to be operational by next month. A German victim of CIA rendition and torture has won a landmark victory in European court. Khalid al-Masri was seized in Macedonia in 2003 as part of the CIA's secret extraordinary rendition program. He was beaten, held in a secret prison in Afghanistan for months before being abandoned by the CIA on a hillside in Albania. On Thursday, the European Court of Human Rights condemned Macedonia's transfer of al-Masri into CIA custody and ruled his treatment in U.S. custody amounted to torture. European Court Judge Nicholas Bratza unveiled the verdict.
That there has been a violation of Article 3 of the Convention by the respondent state on account of the inhuman and degrading treatment to which the applicant was subjected while being held in the hotel in Skopje. 5 holds that the respondent state is responsible for the ill treatment to which the applicant was subjected at Skopje airport, and that this treatment must be classified as torture within the meaning of Article 3 of the Convention. 6 holds that the responsibility of the respondent state is engaged with regard to the applicant's transfer into the custody of the United States authorities, despite the existence of a real risk that he would be subjected to further treatment contrary to Article 3 of the Convention.
The ruling marked the first time a court of laws determined the CIA treatment of terror suspects constitutes torture, and the first time a European state has been held liable for being complicit. Al-Masri attorney Darian Pavli welcomed the landmark decision.
It's 9 years, and it has taken legal proceedings in 3 different countries, which provided no results for him. Today, this court has confirmed what we knew all along, that his story was true, that he was a victim of an offense of extraordinary rendition. And I think it's a major victory for Europe and the cause of human rights in the world generally.
A previous effort by al-Masri to sue Bush administration officials for his capture and torture was dismissed by the U.S. Supreme Court in 2007. He since brought a case against the CIA before the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. In a statement, the American Civil Liberties Union said, quote, "Today's ruling makes it harder for the United States to continue burying its head in the sand and ignoring domestic and global calls for full accountability for torture. And this remarkable decision will no doubt put greater pressure on European nations to fully account for their complicity." Meanwhile, in Britain, another victim of CIA-tied rendition has been given a $3.5 million settlement from the British government. Sami al-Sadi, a leading opponent of former Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi, was forcibly sent to Libya along with his wife and 4 children in 2004 in a joint operation between the U.S., Britain, and Gaddafi-ruled Libya. Sadi and his family were forced onto a plane in Hong Kong and sent back to Libya, where they were all imprisoned, and Sadi himself was tortured. Kat Craig, legal director of the British charity Reprieve, said Britain played a critical role in Sadi's ordeal.
It was British intelligence that led to the rendition, and British officers who interrogated these individuals whilst they were being detained under the Gaddafi regime and whilst they were being tortured. Mr. al-Sadi's only motivation now is to find accountability and justice, and to ensure that this will not happen again to others, that the British government stays within the bounds of law, as they failed to do in the case where they rendered and were complicit in the rendering of him and his family.
Sadi was one of a number of Libyans rendered by the U.S. and Britain back to Libya despite the knowledge they would be tortured. Evidence of the CIA's collaboration with Gaddafi emerged after Gaddafi's U.S.-backed ouster in 2011. In related news, the Senate Intelligence Committee has approved a sweeping report on CIA rendition and torture under the Bush administration. The committee chair, Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein of California, said the nearly 6,000-page report provides startling details about U.S. kidnapping operations and secret prisons overseas, including, quote, details of each detainee in CIA custody, the conditions under which they were detained, how they were interrogated, the intelligence they actually provided, and the accuracy or inaccuracy of CIA descriptions about the program, it said. It's unclear if the report will be publicly released. In Afghanistan, a suicide bomber has killed 2 Afghan civilians and a U.S. soldier in an attack outside the Kandahar air base. Another 3 people were wounded. Later in the broadcast, we will bring you a report from Afghanistan. The attack came shortly after a visit by Defense Secretary Leon Panetta, who is in Afghanistan, to discuss the future role of U.S. troops beyond the 2014 withdrawal date. In a joint appearance with Afghan President Hamid Karzai, Panetta repeated a U.S. vow to maintain an enduring presence in Afghanistan.
We are going to maintain an enduring presence in Afghanistan beyond 2014. We will be drawing down our forces. Obviously, the Afghan army will assume full responsibility for the security of the country, but we will be there to provide support, to provide training, to provide assistance, to provide help on counterterrorism, and to provide support for the forces that are here. So we will be maintaining an enduring presence.
In Israel and the occupied territories, Israeli troops have attacked 2 journalists with the news service Reuters as they covered the aftermath of the fatal shooting of a Palestinian teenager. camera operators Yusri Al-Jamal and Mamoun Waswas were on their way to the military checkpoint where Israeli troops had shot the boy dead when they were stopped by an Israeli military vehicle. According to their account, the Israeli soldiers punched them, forced them to strip in the street, then fired off a tear gas canister. Waswas was overcome by the tear gas fumes and treated in the local hospital. 2 other Palestinian journalists working for local outlets were also stopped and accosted. The Venezuelan government says President Hugo Chavez has suffered internal bleeding following his cancer surgery in Cuba earlier this week, but is still showing signs of recovery. It's unclear if Chavez will be healthy enough to return to Venezuela in time for a swearing-in ceremony scheduled for January 10th. Predicting a complex and difficult recovery process, Venezuelan Vice President Nicolás Maduro called for national unity while Chavez is on the mend.
Fue muy claro al plantearnos la necesidad de que nuestro pueblo.
It is very clear that we present the need for our people to accompany him in his treatment, but also that our people be serenely prepared to face these hard, complex, and difficult days that we will have to live through. These are situations that are complex and difficult that can only be faced with the people's unity.
Lawmakers in Michigan continue to push through controversial measures before the new legislature convenes next month. On its final day of voting, Michigan's Senate has approved a new law allowing Michigan areas to declare bankruptcy or fall under the control of an unelected emergency manager enabled to fire public officials and shed union contracts. State Republicans advanced the measure after voters repealed a similar initiative on Election Day last month. Critics have described it as Michigan's local dictator's law. Michigan lawmakers have now also approved a sweeping anti-abortion bill considered to be among the most extreme in the nation. The bill imposes a number of burdensome and complicated requirements that critics say could force the state's abortion clinics to close. It also prohibits the use of telemedicine to prescribe medication abortions in a blow to access for rural women. The measures are part of a wave of bills in a lame duck session that also saw the enactment of 2 controversial anti-union laws making Michigan a so-called right-to-work state earlier this week. A North Carolina judge has voided the death sentences of 3 prisoners after determining their ethnicity played a major role in their sentencing. Tillman Golphin and Quintel Augustine, who are both African-American, and Christina Walters, who is Native American, were each given life sentences without parole Thursday after Judge Gregory Weeks ruled they were covered by the state's Racial Justice Act. Judge Weeks wrote, quote, "In the writing of prosecutors long buried in case files and brought to light for the first time in this hearing, the court finds powerful evidence of race consciousness and race-based decision-making." And President Obama has signaled for the first time his administration will not try to override recently approved laws in Washington and Colorado approving the recreational use of marijuana. Both laws have recently taken effect following their approval and ballot measures on Election Day. In a yet-to-air interview with ABC News, President Obama says, quote, "We've got bigger fish to fry. It would not make sense for us to see a top priority as going after recreational users in states that have determined it's legal." Obama's comments mark his first on the issue following widespread speculation the White House would try to challenge the Colorado and Washington laws. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Juan Gonzalez. Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world.
And Juan, before we go on, congratulations on this day, December 14th, 1987. You went to the New York Daily News celebrating 25 years today as a columnist with the paper.
Oh, yeah, it's hard to believe. I figured after the first few years I'd be gone. I was actually fired in 1990 as part of when the Tribune Company owned the paper and fired all the unionized employees at the time and hired replacement workers.
And you led the strike.
We persevered in a strike there that lasted 6 months. And, of course, not only was the publisher who fired us gone, but later so was the owner, the Tribune Company, which is now a bankrupt news organization. And luckily the Daily News is still around. around, and somehow I'm still around there working at the paper and producing columns, yes.
Well, I look forward to reading a spread on you in Sunday's paper of the New York Daily News, and we'll link to it at democracynow.org.
Yeah, well, let's get on to more important stuff.
Thanks so much for watching this report from Democracy Now!, your daily independent global news hour. We don't accept advertising or corporate funding, but rather rely on donations from viewers like you. Please make your contribution by visiting democracynow.org. We need your support today to keep bringing you this hard-hitting, in-depth reporting.